Hi, Steve here. In this video today, we're going to be talking about implementing a data platform and what this means. We'll look at how we get from the beginning with just not very much data estate into things like a data lake to support reporting and into a full data platform with components in a very modular way, sort of through phases and what this means. This is part of a video series, which is linked down below in the description. If you haven't seen the others, it might be worth jumping in because we're going to be using some of that terminology in this video. If you have, let's get cracking. Or if you just want to skip them and go straight into this video, we'll do it and review first. So, without wasting any more time, let's get started. Let's talk about a data lake versus a data platform. First off, we're going to do a terminology review. Please watch this video on the data platform if you haven't already, because it goes through this. And in case you haven't watched it and you want to get straight in, we give a quick terminology on the components of the data platform. So this is a architecture diagram of a typical platform. And you will see many of these bits, which are components. So components are separate pieces of the overall system and a specific function. So this component is the data infrastructure component. Within a component, we have layers, which is a functional part of that component. And within a component, we have assets. These are specific tools or technology that build up the layer. With that, let's talk about a data lake versus a data platform. Now, a data lake, as we spoke about before, is very much just a platform where we store data. In this terminology, we're saying we're building a data lake. So this is a specific data lake, a specific thing that we are going to build. The data lake in this case is a technology implementation. So a technology implementation focused on consolidating data, improving the quality, and enabling this reporting in BI. So very much BI focused, reporting focus. When we have lots of data and lots of sources, we're going to get it in the same place. So how would that look like? Typically, we would have our sources, and the first component that we would build is a data engineer. We kind of have these three layers. Now, this is maybe a bit oversimplified. There could be more layers in sort of bigger projects. This is just a nice simple view for you to sort of understand key parts that go into creating these. So first thing we're going to have is we have our ingest, prepare, and store layer. So obviously we ingest the data from our sources. In this case, we might have a more curated layer in the store layers. So these are just different stages of the data. We might keep the data in the raw format, so we can see what they look like when it came in. We then prepare it, maybe through something like a notebook, some sort of lake technology to curated data. For that, we want to do this deployment layer. And this is things like adding CI/CD, adding disaster recovery, all of this sort of stuff that allows us to actually deploy this and put this into production. Again, this is generally the sort of the bare minimum we have here. There may be, of course, a lot more that go into this, but generally these are some of the bare minimum things that we have. Then we sort of have this reporting and BI layer. When we're just deploying a data lake like this, I very much want to show that we generally have this semantic layer. Semantic layer acts as a gate, I think, between the end users and the consumption stage and everything we've done in data engineering. Also sort of acts as this governance layer that pushes everyone through the semantic layer, shows one version of the truth, that we all have the same metrics, security, all of this can be in that semantic layer. Then we would probably roll out something like this. Have some data, we just want to pull the data into a CSV, something like that. Some insights, generally some automated AI insights, chat to your data, sort of co-pilot the out-the-box type stuff. And then obviously reporting, where we build very specific reporting. And again, rooted from the curated layer, just goes through the semantic layer, and it can populate all of this for our end users. So that, if we want to do this data lake, really recommend, obviously we have the governance here. The governance is definitely less of a technological component. This is more of a planning component. You could argue that in the deployment layer, maybe the master data management layer, the governance layer, they do sort of overlap. In this case, I'm going to say the data engineering is very technology focused. So the CI/CD, the recovery will be technology built on whatever tools we use to build the data engineering, the data infrastructure layer. The governance and lifecycle component, this is very much a strategic component. As you can see, we plan, govern, secure. There will be some technology to implement this. But again, this is more of a strategic, wider governing and part of the wider organization. The master data management is an extra component, and this is really data quality. Usually, this is another sort of technology implementation, maybe separate or its own tool that can actually do a lot more than just infrastructure. You may cover things outside of just this data lake. We kind of have these three layers. I like to think sometimes of separating the semantic layer into its own sort of component. Generally don't go out that way, but it can be helpful to think of this. And I really want to emphasize the importance of a semantic layer when you're rolling up the data lake like this. So that was a data lake. A data platform, on the other hand, is a strategic tool made of multiple components that sort of compiles master data. And that is data that is AI ready, that is trusted and validated. It then democratizes this data, leverages it across the business. So while the data lake implementation really focuses on compiling the data and getting it ready for reporting, data platform generally has applications much wider than this across the business in lots of strategic areas. So here we might have our data infrastructure layer like we did before. However, we might have a much more expanded data infrastructure layer. So similar, we have our sort of batch that we had in our just data lake implementation, where we have the ingest, and we have, maybe in this case, we have three layers. So we have a bronze, silver, gold, rather than raw and curated. And we have multiple steps to prepare and curate this data. So this kind of has an expanded data transformation steps, because this data platform has to use data in a lot more than just for reporting. We have the same thing as we had before, where we have the CI/CD, the disaster, the recovery, and the deployment layer. Additionally, you probably have additional metadata. Things like a lot more lineage, classifications, and more metadata. Generally, when we're building a data platform, we need a lot more work on this deployment layer, because rather than just having a place to dump all our data and store it for some reports, this is being used strategically across the business. So we put a lot more effort into making this well deployed. Again, we have our reporting MPI layer. I'm focusing more on the infrastructure here. So this kind of made these a bit smaller to fit on the page. But then we have our generally out of our gold data or whatever our last stage is, goes into a semantic reporting. Same thing where we have a sort of semantic layer with these semantic models. We might also have this real time. Could be real time, could be event-based driven, CDC, anything like this. But generally something not just on batch and a schedule, like a lot of data lakes. This real time might display directly into reports. We might also take some of this data, put it back through into our transformation step as well. On top of this, something we didn't have in the pure data lake is more this application layer. This application layer generally takes our internal data stores and really reformats that for different types of use. One could be external, where there's external reports or websites like this. And the other is building databases that are very specific, like when we talked about data warehouses versus data lakes. The databases are much more SQL-based, much more application-based to support applications, such as website applications or apps built off the data. So outside of just reporting. This is where we have the intelligent collaboration component. By expanding our data lake into this data platform, we enable things like building into productivity apps having agentic workflows and full automation of our data by using these specific components and different views of the data, lots more deployment layer to enable this. Then we also take care of our AI and machine learning, sort of more advanced analytics when we do sort of custom ML logic, all of this to do a lot more powerful analytics on the data. Again, we have this MDM there, the master data management. This may be hooked up to the source and really making sure, that our source data is in sync with the data that we have in our data platform. And of course, the governance. The governance and the MD might be a lot more work in the data platform than just the data lake, because this is covering a lot more of a landscape. But again, these are part, especially governance, part of the wider strategy of the organization. Now I want to talk about how do I build a data lake or a data platform. We talked before about what these are. Now let's see what sort of effort goes into actually building. So typically, the process we would follow, not always linear like this, but we'd start with our data infrastructure, right? Maybe just kind of build this data lake, start, ingest all the data, single source of truth. Next, we sort of look at this reporting and BI, again, having a semantic layer to route end users into the back end, and have reporting, business friendly stuff, self-service, all of this. Now we really need to implement this data management and governance. So MDM, with this master data, trusted, validated, AI-ready data. That's what these two components do. And it's simple. It doesn't necessarily have to come third. Typically, we would do a bit of this at the start, but normally you can't implement it fully until you actually build the stuff, right? And you have stuff to actually apply this to. So it's sort of an ongoing stuff. But this is really where I like to put it. So say this is where you roll it out. Okay, we take advantage, right? Unleash productivity. Where we can do our AI, we can do machine learning, our apps, our agentic stuff. Because we have these foundations in place, we're able to do this. And then ongoing training and support and life cycle. This is a platform, right? It's not just one and done. There will be stuff that needs to be maintained over time. It needs to have effort and continuous support against it. How do we actually implement this? This is a typical implementation in a sort of phased approach. We can have our first phase where we implement basic data infrastructure with reporting and BI. And these are some of the layers that we will implement in the assets. This is not a complete list, and we might actually do more than this in phase one. These are some of the key ones. So this is sort of building that very technological bit of the data lake, right? Get some ingestion in, get our transformations and some reporting. In phase one, we should have actually some reports and some use to the business. It'll be very basic, still a lot more to do. Phase two might be extend this infrastructure, give that deployment layer to CI/CD, and then do some additional reporting. This is where we can have more of that semantic layer, maybe allow self-service, a bit more data exploration as well. Phase three, again, this is where we implement the maintenance, the MDM, and the governance. This is ongoing. We do some of this in phase one and phase two, but this is really a phase where we can focus on this and get all of this implemented. Phase four, now is where we sort of get into the fun part. We're building apps, we're building external reporting, this sort of stuff, using our data in an application layer to actually build and build out more stuff and more productivity tools. One of the next phase is where we look at more apps, right, and actually build out automation, automate a lot of this, do a lot more machine learning and advanced analytics. So sort of extending the infrastructure that we had in phase four with the application layers and metadata, building this out and actually using this in production apps. And phase six would be sort of this full platform support where we might have agentic AI. We have a lot of automation, sort of end-to-end automation, agents doing stuff with the data, very well governed, very well set up infrastructure. And this is where we can unleash all of that really cool AI stuff. Not everyone will necessarily go through all steps. And this could be quite a long project. It might take a while. Typically, we have some sort of milestones along the way. With even just the implementation of phase one thing that's really important for data projects is to really quickly get out an MVP. Now, MVP is a minimum viable product. So, what is the minimum product that we can release that's actually able to be released and able to be used? So, we will have a data lake MVP here. It's going to get your data into one place. It's going to provide some reports and probably give a fair bit of value to the business. As we go through and we sort of expand this in phase two, we add the management and the MDM and the governance. This is where sort of phase three, I would say this is a nice, workable, reliable thing that we've released here, this data lake. Not a full data platform because we don't have the support and the strategic outside of the lake, but as a reporting tool, getting our data into one place with the governance, we've got CI/CD, we are in a good place here, sort of by phase three. Going through, I would say once we add this infrastructure for sort of the rest of the company, the other components, this is where we sort of have this foundational data platform. We've already added the initial stages, we've done some governance in the end. Now we've added infrastructure. We won't necessarily take advantage of it and build those things on top, but as a infrastructure and a data platform, it is that foundations that will enable us, and this actually can be used elsewhere. And finally, we sort of have this phase six where we have this full data platform support. So this is really having everything, right? This full data platform. Now, this is just a sample. In real life, there may be way more phases than this, there may be less. Obviously, every data platform implementation is quite different. This is a really common sort of pattern and a way that we see rolling these out, and having done this quite a lot of times. What these sort of look like as these milestones, we have this data lake MVP, just really just the engineering piece, infrastructure piece, and then the reporting BI. Then, as we say, we get to this data lake, which is not an MVP, but it has this MDM and some governance around it. The foundations is where we really expand the infrastructure, right? So we just come from just some data engineering to the whole infrastructure. We've added a lot more into this, and this is really those foundations. Again, not added a huge amount of immediate value here, but we've enabled this data platform and turned it into a data platform, enabling us to actually expand out. And of course, as we went earlier in another video, earlier in the video, we have this full data platform support here, and we have all the components that we want. Again, there could be more components. You might not want these specific ones. They could be different. But again, this is a generalized and very sort of common data platform. I'm going to talk next a bit about data maturity. This is quite a common data maturity model where we can go through as a company gets more and more mature with its data platform. So the first is this descriptive analytics. This is really explaining what happened. So very looking back, very basic start of the analytics journey. We can say what's happened in the business. Diagnostic is the next step, and this is where BI really comes in. The why, we're able to link data from multiple systems. We're able to drill through. So if you're saying what, maybe our sales went down, this is where you start saying why, what happened to cause this to go down. The next phase, and this is quite a big jump, I think, from diagnostic to predictive, is saying what's going to happen. And this is where we're using more advanced analytics, more AI. Prescriptive, then, is the next step of this. Instead of just saying we think, sales are going to go down in this region next year, we can actually start saying what we should do in order to combat this. Maybe offering discounts, we can simulate this, will help increase our sales. And then we have sort of agentic, and this is quite a new one. And this is sort of an autonomously layer, right? Acts autonomously. This is AI actually implementing and figuring this stuff out on its own. Having agents, agentic AI, that actually go and can perform actions and act as self, sort of doing analytics from end to end. So how does that look in terms of our data platform? Well, we typically look at maturity like this, where we have the value versus the effort. And the more of the data maturity we want, the more value it is, but also the more effort involved. So sort of it looks like this that we travel through, go up like this, right? So the more effort we put in to get to this agentic, the more value that's going to provide us. And how does this relate to our data platform? We can sort of map where the phases go. So this phase one sort of gives us the initial bits and the descriptive as we go through. We can see we sort of climb this this arrow up towards the right. You can see there's a bit more effort. It's more phases at the start. Typically, that's true with every project. We have a little lot of work to do in order to get this data maturity. As you keep going, you end up speeding up a bit going through. So this data late VP is sort of very descriptive. We have our data in one place. We can do our basic reporting. Diagnostic, where we get more of this, we have more infrastructure, we have more extended reporting, we have a bit more trust with the governance in the MDM. And this is where we can really start combining multiple sources and looking at the why. In building a predictive and will kind of give us this data platform foundation. Once we build this, gives us the predictive, gives us the ability. We've done those application layers, the ML. We can start actually using some auto ML type stuff that actually allows us to do this without setting up applications or writing custom AI because we've got those foundations in place. So we can actually start using the data foundation as sort of predictive. And then this full backbone support, the components phase 5 and phase 6 will get us into this full data platform. This is really this agentic workflow. This is when we can actually start building agents and AI agents, knowing our data is in a very, very good place, that we can trust AI and make the most of it. Obviously, AI needs good data. You see this as a straight arrow, but in realistic, it's sort of more of this curve, as I said. Right? We start off not slow, but there's a lot more work to do up front, getting all this down, the foundations of the lake and the governance in. Once we get that, we can really speed up and gain momentum. There you have it. That is a nice overview of what a data platform is, how to get there from A to B, sort of the effort it takes and the steps required to build each component, thinking of this in a very modular way. This is part of the series of implementing a data platform. So definitely go and watch these other videos if you haven't already, which covers some of this. And we really look forward to seeing you in the next one. Please definitely like and subscribe. And thanks so much.